Something changed in 2026 that nobody fully predicted. Not a new gun, not a new manufacturer, not a military contract or a law enforcement adoption. Something more fundamental than any of those things. The conversation around what caliber belongs in your pistol shifted. Quietly at first, then loudly, then everywhere at once. Forums, ranges, gun shops, competitive circuits, and the comment sections of every firearms channel on the platform started asking the same question at the same time. Is 9mm still the right answer? For decades, that question had a simple answer. Yes. Obviously, yes. The FBI reevaluated their ballistics data, dropped the .40, and landed back on 9mm because modern hollow point loads delivered penetration and expansion nearly on par with larger calibers, but with softer recoil, higher capacity, and cheaper training ammunition. Law enforcement followed. Civilians followed that. The carry market exploded. Pistols got smaller and better every year, and 9mm became the American default, not because anyone told us to shoot it, but because it made more sense than anything else available. That logic has not disappeared in 2026, but it has competition now. Real competition. The kind backed by data, by new platforms, and by a shift in what serious shooters are actually asking for when they walk into a gun shop. This video breaks down exactly what is challenging 9mm in 2026, why it is happening now specifically, and which caliber the data says has the strongest case for the #1 position. Some of these answers are going to surprise you. Let's go. Why 9mm dominated for so long and why that is changing? To understand what is threatening 9mm in 2026, you have to understand why it dominated in the first place. The argument for 9mm was never that it was the most powerful option. It was never the flattest shooting or the hardest hitting. The argument was that it was good enough at everything simultaneously while being cheap, available, and controllable enough for a wide range of shooters. That combination made it nearly impossible to argue against for most applications. In Q1 2026, two distinct engineering trends are driving 9mm discussion: the perfection of the micro-compact concealed carry pistol and the exponential rise of suppressed pistol caliber carbines. The legislative changes effectively eliminating the NFA tax stamp burden for suppressors have caused a massive spike in 9mm threaded barrel sales and dedicated home defense carbine setups, because 9mm is inherently easy to suppress using 147 grain or 147 grain subsonic ammunition that travels below the speed of sound. So 9mm is not dying. Let's be completely clear about that. It is evolving and expanding into new use cases, but the shooters who are looking beyond it have a very specific complaint that 9mm has never fully answered. Terminal performance on hard targets and in field environments where the consequences of insufficient stopping power are serious. That complaint has found a very specific answer in 2026, and that answer has a name: the Challenger 10mm Auto. The most notable shift in the 2026 firearms landscape is the meteoric rise of the 10mm Auto. It is the caliber generating the most rapid growth in social media discussion volume, new platform development, and ammunition sales among serious shooters in the first quarter of 2026. Here's why that rise is happening now and not 5 years ago. The 10mm auto cartridge is not new. It was developed in the early 1980s, adopted briefly by the FBI before being abandoned for being too powerful for average agents to control, and then kept alive primarily by hunters and outdoorsmen who needed serious stopping power in a semi-automatic platform. For decades, it occupied a niche: powerful, impressive, but impractical for most applications because the platforms chambered for it were large, heavy, and expensive. That changed when two things happened simultaneously in 2025 and 2026. First, manufacturers started building 10mm platforms that were actually designed for carry and field use, rather than simply adapted from existing frames. The S&W M&P 10mm carry comp, unveiled at SHOT Show 2026, is specifically engineered to tame the 10mm recoil impulse in a carry-sized package. By adding a factory compensator to the carry model, S&W has made full-power 10mm loads, manageable for rapid fire in a way that previous platforms never achieved. That is a genuine breakthrough. The historic knock on 10mm was that it was miserable to shoot fast in a polymer handgun. The carry comp eliminates that complaint from the factory. Second, serious shooters started doing the terminal performance math on what 10mm actually delivers compared to 9mm, and the gap was significantly larger than most people realized. A standard 9mm defensive load delivers approximately 350 to 400 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. A full-powered 10mm auto load, something like a 200-grain hard cast running at 1,200 feet per second, delivers over 600 foot-pounds. That is not a marginal difference. That is nearly double the energy in the same semi-automatic platform with only a moderate increase in perceived recoil when the gun is properly designed for the cartridge. For hunters, for backcountry carry and bear country, for shooters who operate in environments where barriers like vehicle glass or heavy clothing are a realistic concern, that energy gap matters in a way that no amount of modern hollow point engineering can bridge with a 9mm cartridge. What the data actually says about 10mm in 2026. The 10mm auto in 2026 benefits from a new generation of shooter who is making caliber decisions based on specific mission requirements rather than general-purpose convenience. The growth is concentrated in three distinct shooter demographics: hunters using semi-automatic pistols as field sidearms, serious home defenders who want margin beyond what 9mm provides, and competitive shooters running USPSA, Limited 10, and similar divisions where the caliber's power factor advantage creates a scoring benefit. The platform development backing this shift is real and accelerating. The Glock 20 Gen 5 remains the most widely carried 10mm pistol in the country, and it continues to receive consistent updates and accessory support. The Springfield XDM Elite OSP in 10mm delivers a 16-round capacity with a match-grade 5.25-inch barrel and factory optics cut. The new S&W M&P 10mm carry comp makes the caliber viable for daily carry for the first time in any platform that did not require compromising on shootability. Ammunition development has followed platform development, as it always does. Federal's HST line now includes a 10mm load, specifically engineered for defensive use rather than hunting, expanding reliably at defensive engagement distances rather than requiring the velocity of a longer barrel to perform. Speer Gold Dot 10mm loads have similarly been tuned for defensive terminal performance. The complaint that 10mm defensive ammunition was limited to hunting-focused loads designed for maximum penetration rather than controlled expansion is no longer accurate in 2026. The honest comparison: 9mm versus 10mm in 2026. Here's where the script needs to be honest rather than clickbait. 9mm is not losing its position as the most popular pistol caliber in America in 2026. It is not going to. The economics alone make that impossible. 9mm ammunition is cheaper to manufacture, cheaper to purchase, available in more varieties from more manufacturers, and chambered in more pistol platforms than any other cartridge in history. Those advantages do not disappear because a challenger is getting more attention. What is changing is the category of shooter who is reconsidering their caliber choice. The casual range shooter, the new carrier, the law enforcement officer whose department specifies a caliber, the competition shooter in a division where 9mm is standard. None of these shooters are moving to 10mm in significant numbers, and there is no compelling reason for them to do so. But the shooter who carries in environments where human threats are not the only concern, the hunter who wants a semi-automatic field sidearm with genuine stopping power, the serious home defender who wants margin beyond the minimum necessary, the experienced carrier who has decided that the recoil trade-off is worth the terminal performance gain, those shooters are moving to 10 10mm at a rate that the industry has not seen before. And the platforms available to them in 2026 are better than anything that existed even 3 years ago. The other calibers making moves in 2026. 10mm is the headline, but it is not the only caliber gaining ground on 9mm in specific categories. The .30 Super Carry, introduced by Federal in 2022, has found a small but loyal following among concealed carriers who want higher capacity in the same frame size without moving to a larger caliber. The .30 Super Carry runs a 100-grain projectile at approximately 1,250 feet per second from a 3.1-inch barrel, delivering ballistic performance comparable to standard pressure 9mm, while allowing manufacturers to fit more rounds into the same magazine dimensions. For a carrier whose primary concern is round count without increasing frame size, the .30 Super Carry makes a genuine argument. The 5.7 by 28mm is gaining attention for entirely different reasons. The cartridge's bottleneck case and high velocity produce extremely flat trajectory and minimal recoil in platforms like the FN57 and the Ruger 5-7. In 2026, the 5.7 by 28mm is specifically gaining traction in the pistol caliber carbine market, where magazine sharing between a carry pistol and a home defense carbine creates a logistics argument that competing calibers cannot match. The .45 ACP, meanwhile, has found an unexpected second wind. The legislative changes reducing the burden of suppressor ownership have made the .45 ACP's inherent subsonic velocity a practical advantage rather than an academic one. Standard 230-grain .45 ACP ammunition travels below the speed of sound naturally, making it an exceptional suppressor host without the need for specialty subsonic loads that 9mm requires for the same effect. For the growing community of shooters building suppressed home defense setups, that natural subsonic characteristic is a genuine advantage. The verdict. What is the new number one? Here is the honest answer that the data supports in 2026. For most shooters in most situations, 9mm remains the most rational choice. Cheaper ammunition, more platform options, easier to shoot well for a wider range of skill levels, and modern hollow point performance that is genuinely excellent for the defensive applications most civilians actually face. But the caliber that has made the strongest argument for reconsidering the default in 2026 is the 10mm auto. Not because it is replacing 9mm across the board, because it is delivering something 9mm genuinely cannot. Significant terminal performance margin in field environments, a new generation of carry-viable platforms that make the recoil manageable, and ammunition development that has caught up to the caliber's potential after decades of being overlooked. The 10mm auto's rise in 2026 is not a trend. It is the result of platform development finally catching up to what the cartridge was always capable of delivering. The S&W M&P 10mm carry comp, the Glock 20 Gen 5 in full production, and a new generation of defensive ammunition loads have removed every practical argument against the 10mm that existed 5 years ago. The king has not been dethroned for everyone, but for a growing and specific category of serious shooter in 2026, the 10mm auto has made a case that is genuinely difficult to argue against, and the numbers show that more and more people are choosing not to argue. 9mm dominated because it made more sense than the alternatives for most shooters in most situations. That logic has not disappeared, but the alternatives have gotten significantly better. The platforms chambering them have gotten smaller and more capable. The ammunition has gotten more refined, and the shooters asking whether 9mm is still the right answer for their specific needs are getting better answers than they ever have before. Drop your current carry caliber in the comments and tell us one thing. Has 2026 made you reconsider it?